Rob, you mentioned that you were just coming to terms with the biro. I decided not to have a PowerPoint because I'm hopeless with that sort of thing, but I then stupidly swapped it for a computer with a sort of an auto cue. And so if it breaks down, then I'm dead. So I'm hoping desperately it will start. And I was profoundly moved by what you've just said. It made me want to stop speaking at all today. You've sort of, by presenting your pain so bravely, almost immobilized me. But we can't let that happen. We have to continue. We have to carry on. That's, I guess, what we are trying to do in the social services in Christchurch. For me, the most impressive thing to come out of the earthquake was not the oft-quoted resilience that people say we show. We're a tough lot here in Canterbury. We know that. And I suspect we're a little bit tired of being told so. It actually risks closing us down emotionally, as we feel we're letting the side down if we're not resilient. And sometimes all we want to do is scream. What is impressive for me, however, is the creativity that was shown. And it can be clearly seen in the gap fillers and in the many interesting places that have sprung up where you might least expect them. It can be seen in the bars and the cafes and otherwise empty sections, in the pop-up malls, and in finding that your accountant and your lawyer is working out of a container or somebody else's lounge. At the City Mission, our own little bit of creativity was not exactly crowned with success. We couldn't use our building because it was part of the red zone, so we moved into the Riccarton Club. They kindly offered us accommodation there and looked after us really well. Well, you might wonder why an agency dealing with addictions and drug abuse was doing in an environment that perhaps wasn't conducive to the very people it looked after. In fact, some of our clients were delighted with the accommodation. But we had second thoughts about the close proximity to bars and gaming machines when they proved somewhat irresistible to them. There is now a great opportunity for people in Christchurch to develop and to prosper. And I hope that the many chances to do this will not be lost. This is, however, a city of winners and losers. While it might be embarrassing to have to admit this, many people have gained from the disaster, and many other people are worse off. Perhaps it's always been like that. Both the winners and the losers need all the creativity that they can muster. Great creativity has been shown by many of the poor and the marginalised in our city. While many of us have been working towards regaining some of what we have lost, there are people in Christchurch who have never had much in the first place. And they are struggling to make ends meet, as they always have, but in an increasingly barren environment. Immediately after the quakes, many of our social problems, in fact, seemed to decrease. For example, suicide numbers fell. And those who have worked in the areas of disasters warned us not to be complacent. They told us that within the next couple of years, things would get worse, and they have. Social agencies are now working at full capacity, at overcapacity. We're over-delivering, and the demands of our services keep growing and growing. In our food bank, for example, we've experienced in the last year a 68% increase in demand, and that doesn't look like slowing down. Great creativity has also been shown by agencies in Christchurch who are now seeing a different group of people from those they used to see. We're seeing people who once used to support us and are now coming to us for help. Each day we get inquiries for decent housing, and we hear stories that would make you weep. I don't know what constitutes a housing crisis, but we're hearing of homelessness and deprivation. Post-quake, most agencies are still doing the work they did before the quake, looking after the people that they're mandated to look after. But we're doing this with a greater sense of urgency for a greater number of people and in a much more complicated environment. We all talk about getting back to normal, if we ever do, as soon as possible. We all want this, especially for our children. Experience for disaster teaches us that the sooner children can gain routine, play with their friends, return to their neighbourhood, the better their chances are for avoiding depression and anxiety. It seems to me that playing with your mates is a much better cure than going for counselling. So what did we do here in Christchurch? We created an aftershock of school closures with its resultant dislocation. While many of us complain about things not happening soon enough and decisions not being made at all, and God knows I'm one of those who lost a house and have just come to settlement, some decisions could have waited. Some didn't need to be made now. Some workers are coming to Christchurch to help with the rebuild, but they're also bringing with them their own social problems. Our alcohol and drug service is already dealing with some of these people who have left their supports and in many cases their families and their countries. There needs to be supports put in place to ensure that while we're rebuilding our city, more lives are not destroyed through lack of support, isolation, lack of knowledge, or indifference. In the midst of anxiety, depression, isolation, loneliness, and overcrowding, it is hard to remain positive and creative, but the social services in Christchurch are doing just that. Social services are as important a part of this city in the infrastructure as our roads, new buildings, and drains. They must be given a share of the resources and the attention so that they also can play their part in this recovery. There is a saying that you can tell the worth of society by the way it treats its most vulnerable. We have to rebuild Christchurch, and we will. But we have to rebuild for all of us, and not just for some. We're a creative lot, and we can do this. Thank you.